A dragon rider is a person whose mount is a dragon. Dragon riders can be found among the dragon lord families in the Valyrian Freehold, which no longer exists. When the Freehold was still strong, the Targaryen was one of those powerful dragon lord families. Although they were far from the most powerful, they were the last known dragon riders to survive the Doom of Valyria. In this video, I want to talk about the possibility of not only Jon Snow riding a dragon, but their back history and how massive they may be going into Game of Thrones Season 8. Congratulations to Reese Dresden. You have actually won the $20 Amazon gift card. Contact me on the back end of my channel or on Twitter and I will email you the code for your gift card. I'm having another giveaway for a $25 gift card to Amazon that will be ending on February 5th. And to enter that contest, you can slap a like on this video, make sure you're subscribed, go ahead and turn your notifications on so that way you get alerted. And also click the gleam.io link down below and enter all those different bonus ways. Here's a little bit of history when it comes to dragons and them being rode. The very first dragon rider was actually Sir Artus Arryn, and it was believed that he actually rode a massive fountain, but according to Archmaester Pyriston, he said that this was likely a distorted vision, or, just because it was from such a far distance, he was basically riding a dragon, and most of the people who saw him on the ground thought that he was riding a massive falcon. Most of the dragon lords, the noble dragon riding families of the Valyrian Freehold, have been at Valyria when the Doom occurred. None of them survived. Some dragon riders have been in Tyrosh and Lys at the time of the Doom, but they were killed with their dragons in the upheaval that followed. The dragon rider Orion, who was said to be at Qohar, led an army to Valyria to re-establish the Valyrian Freehold, but disappeared with his army and dragons. This made the Targaryens the only dragon riders to survive as they relocated from the Freehold to Dragonstone near Westeros 12 years before the Doom of Valyria. Now this is one of the big mysteries with the dragons. There is either, some sketchy stuff going on where they either die or they suddenly blow up, or they just gradually get smaller and smaller. Now I think it could be argued that the reason why the dragons over time, the Targaryen dragons anyway, got smaller and just more compact over time is because they were actually being poisoned by some of the Maesters. Now if you're curious about a Grand Maester conspiracy, you can actually click the link right up here and that'll take you to a video I did a few weeks back about how I think the Grand Maester theory may come into effect in Game of Thrones Season 8. But in the meantime, between time, one thing I forgot to mention in that video was the fact that Maester Marwyn is very active in learning about magic, and he is actually a Maester at the Citadel. So if the Maesters were completely 100% against magic and dragons, why wouldn't they get rid of Marwyn? Now they do actually have a branch of Maesterology, which is a word that I just made up, in which they learn about how to use the dark arts and magic, and they end up making a Valyrian still linked to do so. So if the Maesters were 100% against magic, I think Maester Marwyn would be kicked out of the Citadel. But to argue that point, Maester Marwyn could in fact be lying and manipulating everyone just so that he can get to Daenerys and cause her to do something stupid and make the throne be usurped from her. So that's definitely a possibility. We know there have been several Maesters in the past that have done several things similar to that. One thing that can be argued in defense of the Maesters being against magic, they most likely decided that they were done with magic and dragons after a dance with dragons. When this happened, there was devastation throughout the land. They killed thousands of innocent people, not to mention wiped out most of, other Targaryens amongst themselves. So the Maester probably collectively, as a group, got together and they were like, look, if we're ever going to do anything to rid ourselves of these crazy Targaryen silver-haired flying dragon people, we need to do something now because they've just almost depleted their entire stock of family Targaryen blood, and now's our chance to enact a plan to finally rid the world for good of these magic and these dragons. Just to understand dragons a little bit better, let's do a quick recap of what dragons actually are. Dragons are massive flying reptiles that can breathe fire onto their enemies and cook their food with the same flame. They are rumored to have a strong connection to magic, which seems to be proven when magic begins to return to the world after the birth of the first three in over 200 years. So basically when Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion were born, magic seemingly flowed back into Westeros. Now, one could argue that magic had still existed in Westeros, just not in the fire magic form. So yes, when dragons came back into the world, fire magic came back into the world, Daenerys and Jon came into their own, but also Bran came into his own. And Bloodraven had existed for several hundred years, practicing his old god magic. So I think it's not fair to say that all magic returned to the world when Daenerys hatched her 3 dragons, because that's not exactly the case. There is magic in Valyria. There may even be dragons in Valyria, and I honestly think that, now when I say Valyria, I guess I mean old Valyria, because it's no longer, the Valyrian freehold. But there could also be dragons in Asshai. There could be dragons in multiple places throughout all of Planetos. So it's not fair to say that magic came back into the world just because Daenerys' dragons were born. Fire magic maybe became more prevalent once Daenerys had her 3 babies. Now, for anyone who's watching who's not familiar with Asshai, I can't just glaze over that without telling you the significance of this city and how awesome and epic it would be if we finally got to see it in Season 8. Now, we do know that Melisandre is headed to Volantis, and it's not completely out of question to go to her home city of Asshai, but just listen to the description of how massive Asshai is. Asshai sprawls for leagues across both sides of the Ash, and its great walls can allegedly contain Volantis, Qarth, King's Landing, and Old Town all combined. So this is how massive it is. Asshai is a mysterious port city located in the far southeast of Essos, where the Ash River meets the Jade Sea. Asshai is on the southernmost edge of the mountainous peninsula known as the Shadowlands, thus the city is often called Asshai by the Shadow, or Asshai, a city that holds all the dragon knowledge. Now, some of this esoteric knowledge that he has can be extremely useful in Game of Thrones Season 8. Now, I know Melisandre is mainly going there I honestly think she's going there to get the fiery hand, to have, backup to help resurrect Jon Snow and all of our fallen heroes, but she could also venture over to Asshai to learn more about dragons, maybe potentially getting some sort of knowledge that will help Daenerys control these dragons, also alluding to the fact that there may be some sort of secret trick to make a dragon more open to having a rider. Now, I know that's a little bit crazy, but Asshai is known to have history of the Dawn Age, and from the annals of the city, they tell of Azor Ahai during the long night, and ancient books claim he will come again. Texts also claim that dragons first appeared in the shadow. So you have Asshai, not only the origin place of dragons, but also one of the origin places and one of the only places that has a lot of information on the original Azor Ahai. So why would Melisandre not go to this magical city and gather all of this information that she can use to go back and help Jon Snow? She's going to be a key player, and in Season 7, we didn't really see too much of her because she was pregnant, so she wasn't able to film a lot of scenes. So I definitely think Melisandre will be playing a crucial role in Game of Thrones Season 8, and that role may be bringing the knowledge. The reason why I say this is because in Asshai, it's not frowned upon to learn and want to learn as much as possible. In other places, dark mystical magic may be banned just for the simple fact that it's evil, but not in Asshai. So everything's practiced openly, they have a long history, and they're not afraid to help for in the future. I wouldn't even be surprised if Melisandre was able to pick up the secrets of Valyrian steel in Asshai. Now on to the theory, since we have a little bit more of an understanding about dragons. We saw that Viserion got shot with a giant ice pick and fell and hit the ground. Now, I do know that this means we're going to have to face him next season, but one thing I think, that will kind of put our mind at ease is that we know that dragons continue growing their whole life, and they never really stop growing. Now that Viserion is undead, I doubt he can still grow. Now, I'm not saying that his power can increase, but I doubt he can grow larger in size. So this means in the break that we're having right now, Drogon and Rhaegal, the two that are still alive and with us for the good guys, may actually get massive. To help with the comparison, to give us like a generalization of how big these dragons were, last season, before Season 7 started, they told us that Drogon was the size of a 747. So there aren't very many planes that are bigger than that. But I think for size comparison, let's just say that Rhaegal becomes the size of a 747, and Drogon, the big boy, becomes the size of an Antonov AN-225. It is generally acknowledged as the largest plane in the world, and the single Antonov AN-225 is the world's heaviest aircraft, maximum takeoff weight greater than 64 tons, and the largest heavier than aircraft in length and wingspan ever entering to operational service. The Antonov AN-225 actually has a wingspan of 290 feet. The 747 wingspan is 196 feet. So, if Drogon does in fact increase to the size of an Antonov AN-225, his wingspan will be massive, and honestly, it will likely cast a shadow over Viserion. Now, with an increased size, but still not being the biggest, if Rhaegal increases to the size of a Boeing 747, I think it would be perfect for Jon Snow to ride him. Now, hear me out. The only reason why Viserion, in my opinion, was struck with an ice spear was for the simple fact that he did not have a rider on him. Look at Drogon. Obviously, Daenerys knows that the biggest dragon should have the most people on them, but if Viserion had a rider on him, he would have been able to dodge, duck, roll. So with that being said, I do think that Viserion would have survived simply of the fact of him having a rider on his back. Now, if dragons were so BA that they didn't need riders and they were able to handle themselves on the battlefield without needing direction, then that would be the case and there would be no dragon riders. But that's not the case. Most of the dragons of old had a dragon rider for a reason. A dragon rider is needed. 2 minds are better than 1. So yes, dragons may be as smart as humans. Arguably, they can be smarter than certain humans. So imagine if Viserion had that extra brain power of a rider on him, letting him know, hey, there's a giant spear headed towards us. The Night King pulled it out in slow-mo. So if there was a human rider on it, not only would it have been diving, ducking, and dipping more, but the human rider would have realized that the Night King is about to launch his spear at us. Now, dragons are smart, yes, but he could have just been in another world just worrying about, trying to figure out where his mom is. Had he have been mounted by Tyrion like I wanted him to, their combined brain power would have made Viserion survive that battle and Beyond the Wall. Speaking of Tyrion ride a dragon, I honestly thought back in Season 6, this was what Tyrion may turn into the Quentin Martell from the books. Basically, Quentin Martell, in the novels, long story short, in A Dance with Dragons, he thinks that he can mount one of Daenerys' dragons for the simple fact that he holds ancient Valyrian blood. Now, it is argued that almost every great house in Westeros has some sort of Targaryen lineage, just not as strong as others. Now, House Martell have Targaryen blood, but this does not end well for him, and while he has his attentions focused on Viserion, Quentin doesn't realize that Rhaegal is behind him, and he gets burned to a crisp by Rhaegal. Now, there's a little bit of theory on that, and Preston Jacobs made a really good video on that, but Quentin ends up dying 3 days later. So, who's to say the same thing won't happen for our boy Jon Snow? Obviously, Jon Snow has way more Valyrian blood than Quentin Martell. Jon Snow's father was Rhaegar Targaryen. Rhaegal is actually named after Jon Snow's father, so it only makes sense that these two are predestined to become dragon and dragon rider. Not only that, if you recall, remember Tyrion wasn't burned when he went down there to feed the dragons, or to take their chains off rather, so that they can go eat. He wasn't burned because they could sense Daenerys' scent on him. Tyrion had spent time with Daenerys, and they can tell, maybe telepathically, they have that connection with their mom, so they can kind of see what she sees. Or Drogon, who saw Tyrion in the pits of Daznak try to rescue Dany, he could have mentally communicated that with his brothers, like, hey, this little guy who's coming downstairs, he's a good dude, don't burn him. If you remember, back in episode 5, Drogon actually meets Jon Snow. He walks up to him, pretty horrifying. Jon Snow stands his ground, although he looks terrified and like he may poop his pants, but Jon Snow ultimately stands his ground. And remember, Drogon did nothing to him, and this was before they slept together. So now the fact that they have slept together, the connection between Jon Snow, Drogon, and Rhaegal will be way more intense. I feel like I shouldn't really have to actually correct myself, but knowing how everyone is in the comments section, when I said that Drogon slept with Jon, what I meant was Jon Snow slept with Daenerys, and because of this, Jon Snow's connection to Drogon and Rhaegal will in fact be intensified. And like I had mentioned earlier, one of the key things you need to ride a dragon is ancient Valyrian blood. Jon Snow has that through House Targaryen, house of his father. This is the first iteration of a marriage between a Targaryen and a House Stark. Pact of Ice and Fire linked them way before. During A Dance with Dragons, Clegane Stark, known as Old Man Stark, and Jacaerys Velaryon actually had this thing called a Pact of Ice and Fire, the terms of which is that a Targaryen princess would marry into House Stark in exchange for the Starks supporting Rhaenyra against Aegon II during the Dance with Dragons. Now that pact, known as the Pact of Ice and Fire, never actually went through, but now it has. It's fulfilled itself in the form of Jon Snow, aka Aegon Targaryen. So, Daenerys will be attempting to rally all resources to her side, and I'm sure Jon Snow will be doing so as well. I think it's only common sense that someone offers to forge some sort of armor for Daenerys and her 2 remaining dragons. This is when Jon Snow could say, hey, you know how awesome Drogon is since you're riding on him? How would it not be even more BA if I were to try to ride Rhaegal, which is ironically named after my father, and I think I deserve to have this dragon. Now, I know the conversation is going to go down nothing like that, and I don't even think Jon Snow will be the one to suggest this. Jon would likely be pretty hesitant in, even thinking about wanting to ride a dragon. Not for fear, but just for the fact that he doesn't want to disrespect Daenerys. He knows that these are members of Daenerys' family, so, Jon being the modest, shy type of guy that he is, I doubt he would step forward and say that. This is where I think Bran steps in and say, hey, look, Jon, it's your destiny to ride this dragon. Now, a lot of people think that Bran is immediately going to tell Jon Snow about his true lineage. I do think that, but after rethinking this theory, I honestly think there's a chance that Bran may not tell Jon Snow the truth about his lineage until after the battle. He knows that if he tells Jon Snow now, that's going to get in his head, and that's going to make him make maybe screwy decisions when he knows that an alliance with Daenerys is the best thing. So just imagine if Bran decides not to tell Jon Snow that him and Daenerys are related, and they go the entire season thinking that everything's perfect, and then Bran ends up dying before he could share this knowledge. Well, of course, Sam knows the knowledge, but Sam can't be as convincing as Bran because Bran can pull the famous, "I know what you did last summer." Another thing that's definitely worth mentioning in this video is the fact that Daenerys has not mounted her dragon all the way up until A Dance with Dragons when she's rescued in the pits of Daznak. When Drogon comes in and saves her, that's the very first time anyone has rode a dragon in all of A Song of Ice and Fire, books and TV show, in over half a century. So the fact that the show is keeping in theme with that sort of by only having Daenerys as the one solo dragon rider, it's time for that to change. This is the final season of Game of Thrones and everything's going to be ramped up. All the characters are going to be maxed out at 11. And everyone else is going to be doing, the most insane things. Jon Snow has been doing this for 7 seasons. So one of the ways that they can guaranteed step his character up and show you that this is next level in-game type stuff is by having him ride a dragon. Now, like I just mentioned, I don't think that he's going to immediately be like, yeah, dragons, hardcore, let's go ride. No, that's not in Jon's character. But with a little bit of convincing and, maybe some more dragon tail, I'm pretty sure he's going to want to hop on a dragon in the non-sexual sense. And another thing, just imagine how awesome it's going to be if Jon Snow does in fact ride a dragon and we get different training montages of him learning how to do so. We got several montages throughout the entirety of Game of Thrones, and it would make sense for them to end the final season without giving us at least one. You remember the one from last season was Sam emptying the poop buckets, and that was kind of gross. So it'd be kind of cool to have a lighthearted, fun one throughout all the intensity that is Game of Thrones Season 8, the final season of our beloved TV show, if we have some funny training montages with Jon Snow on a dragon, maybe falling off a couple of times. I could see him, having to learn how to duck, dip, dodge, and dive. And maybe, he gets arrows shot at him, like dummy arrows. Or maybe he has stuff thrown at him, whacks him in the face a few times. I would love a montage like that. You guys let me know down below if you would love a montage of how to train your dragon Jon Snow style. Imagine exactly how that shot would look. I mean, we know they're in Winterfell, so if Jon Snow is going to train or learn how to fly a dragon, it would be with a snowy backdrop. So Jon Snow on a dragon, snowy backdrop with fire blazing, him being ice and fire, and then his surrounding also being ice and fire. Make sure you guys let me know down below what you think of the possibility that Jon Snow will ride a dragon. Let me know if you agree with my ideas that it only makes sense for another human to ride a dragon because that way the dragon can be used 100% and 2 minds are greater than 1. And also, lastly, let me know if you think that Bran will hold the truth of Jon Snow's lineage until after the Great War and may die and never get a chance to tell him. I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on this video, make sure you're subscribed, and go ahead and turn your notifications on. If you want to be entered into my contest to win this $25 Amazon gift card, the winner will be selected on February 5th. All you have to do is like this video, comment, make sure you're subscribed, then follow the gleam.io link down below in the description and go and enter all those different bonus ways. I want to give a super special thank you to Terry and Mario. Without you all, these videos would not be possible. And if anyone watching would like to join my Patreon and show your support to Sir Hunt's Reviews, all you have to do is check the link down below in the description. I want to give another super special thank you to every single member of my Patreon family. My name's Mark, and this has been Sir Hunt's Reviews.